Welcome back. Our Sarah Eisen just spoke with 1789 Capital founder Omeed Malik and partner Donald Trump Jr. at the FII Forum in Riyadh. She began with asking them why they were at the conference and if they see any investing opportunities in the Middle East.
We only invest in America, so we're not investing anything here. But what we're using is a great platform like FII to meet with both investors and peers. This is a preeminent financial investing conference, really in the world. And as you've seen, the Gulf has become the center of that universe outside of the U.S. And so it behooves us to come here for networking. And earlier today, we had what I thought was a pretty great panel with the CEO of FII, Richard Atias.
Yes.
And so we're pleased to be here with you.
I think they called it patriotic capitalism.
Yeah, that's a phrase I actually coined like 3 or 4 years ago. And I said it earlier today. It feels like that's redundant. Capitalism should just be patriotic.
Yeah.
But during the Biden administration, I think we lost that. And so we really felt like we need to reaffirm that. And that's also the ethos of 1789.
Yeah. Hope we don't lose capitalism, too, here.
Which was that threat. We actually saw that, right? I mean, so much of what we've done, whether it's with 1789 or in the Trump organization, was a response to a ridiculous thing that was going on in America. We started Truth Social as a response to the attack on free speech when we were censored, silenced, and shut down. We started and got into crypto because we were debanked. We were thrown off every major banking platform in America. Those things shouldn't be happening anywhere in the world, let alone in America in 2025. And yet, that was going on. So what we were doing and what we did, even when it wasn't popular under the prior administration, was start investing in American companies that had that ethos, that wanted to perpetuate that freedom that so many Americans actually realized was finally at risk.
So let's talk about some of the investments that you're in.
Sure.
AI is a big theme.
Big one.
I know. So how are you looking at AI right now? Because there's so much hype and a lot of froth, people say. So what kind of companies are you looking for?
So we're looking at a lot of the big guys. I think the reality in AI, there is a threat to what we've seen as it relates to what we were talking about 2 seconds ago on speech. AI has been very left-leaning. It has been manipulating a lot of things for a long period of time. It's sort of like Wikipedia. We need to make sure that there's neutrality in AI so that we get real answers so that people aren't continually manipulated, because people will be manipulated not just by their rainbow hair-colored teacher in kindergarten, but by a machine that understands them, that understands how they react to things, to be able to guide what they're actually thinking and change that course. So we have to make sure that it isn't dominated by one politically inclined machine, but by a neutral and diverse set of thoughts that allows for that freedom. It isn't trying to manipulate a system. It isn't working for a side. It is just all about truth and honesty.
Who are you criticizing there?
There's plenty of them, I think.
Well, I think it's a great point. I love how he answered the question, right? There's a few ways to do it. I'll do it a slightly different angle, but the inputs are what create the outputs with AI, right? And how you're training them. And that's not talked about enough, what you just brought up, which is we thought social media was bad when it was controlled by leftists and censorship. Imagine AI and the chatbot that you're using. That could have a huge impact. So we really do need to be careful about that.
So how do you vet that? You're in, for instance, Perplexity.
For example, actually, we had a decision to make. There's several options. We invested in XAI several times because we believe that Elon has that commitment to free speech that he's talking about and wants to have that unbiased approach. The other thing I would say is we also look at it from a geopolitical standpoint. We led the round in Reflection AI, which is a response to DeepSeek, which came out of China. The reason why that was important is that was, unlike some of the other ones that we all know about, open source. And when you want to build your models in a regulated industry or at the government level, you simply cannot use a Chinese open source model. That's a national security threat, the same way you saw with Huawei a few years ago. So what we did was you backed an American competitor to that called Reflection AI along the video. So that is a perfect example of something that enhances the competitiveness of America through the private sector, and I think it's a quintessential 1789 investment.
Perplexity is another one, though, right?
It is
in the portfolio.
Yeah.
Why that versus some of the competitors like an Anthropic or an OpenAI?
Well, I mean, you're a good reporter because you're getting us to go in a certain direction with that question, and I'll take the bait because I do believe that both of those do have approaches that in the past and some of them currently don't actually really align with our views. And we do think that a couple of those are problematic for the same reasons that Don enumerated. And we hope that that's not the case, but we believe that XAI, Reflection AI, and Perplexity do have the approach that we talked about, both on the prosperity side to make America competitive, and also the more objective, free speech oriented.
XAI, Elon, I mean, you said that you trust Elon's commitment here. You guys are also in SpaceX, I believe, and Neuralink
Yeah.
as well. So how did those deals come together?
well, we got to know throughout the campaign process, and we're totally outside of government now, but we maintained that relationship. Obviously, one of the great minds of civilization, certainly of the last century, to see what he's doing, to see the commitment that he's had toward free speech, what they were able to do with X really changed, I think, the outcome of election in many ways, because people finally actually got a chance to see the alternate viewpoint. I mean, I saw this. I was one of the early people calling out Twitter 1.0, let's call it, back in 16 and 17, and they're like, well, how do you know it's manipulating the algorithm? I'm like, well, because yesterday I was getting 5,000 retweets a post. Today I got 5, like single-digit 5. Something changed. I do my own social media.
Maybe it was
I
a
know
bad
what's
post.
going out there. I can tell when it's a bad one. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? That's an average post. It's a little bit of meat, whatever it is. Sometimes I hit that send button. I know it's a banger. I know what it's going to do because I'm intimately involved in it myself. I'm not having other people do it. And so you saw that immediately. We called it out. Everyone pretended it wasn't happening. Of course, we discovered it was happening, and it was happening at a level that was truly disgusting. When the government was getting involved in preventing that from happening, once you actually had objective speech out there, people could see both sides of a story. They said, oh, wait a second, this is actually correct. They were never exposed to the other side, or if they were, it was 5% of what was happening. So it was a big deal. You saw that a lot, the big issue that I was calling out early, trans women in sports. It was ridiculous. Even Twitter 1.0, I'd say something about it, and the haters, because I was 95% leftist at the time, would say, you know what, man, I hate Don Jr. so much, but you know what, he's right about this one. It was never a real issue, but it was turned into this movement that was somehow beyond reproach. They could do no wrong. You could not call them out. They didn't want equality. They wanted far greater than equality, but no one actually believed it. And yet if you went against it, you were in trouble. You were censored, you were deplatformed, and otherwise. It was totally created, fictitious.
So it was the shift that did it for you.
So all of these sorts of things, watching that change and letting people see both sides of an argument with equal weight, people were coming to our side in droves because it obviously made sense. Common sense is unfortunately not so common these days, and we're trying to make sure that it gets that way.
I get the mentality of what you're looking for and what you're going after, and obviously the ethos is really important. But here's the thing, a lot of people, you've said a few times you're not in the government, but obviously your father is president, and a lot of people see your investments in companies like SpaceX, which is trying to get FAA contracts and approvals. You're in defense companies as well, and they wonder if this is just crony capitalism.
Not at all. We stay totally out of that. We don't get involved in that. These are things that make sense for America. They're common sense investments. We don't have to call the government to invest in something that's beneficial to America. That's the entire ethos of what we've been doing. Don't forget, we were doing these things when it wasn't popular. We were doing these things under the prior Biden administration. We were taking on free speech then when, doing that and defending our side was, practically a jailable offense. And in our case, they tried very hard. So, there's nothing like that at all, and we wouldn't do it.
Let me point out a few differences that also mitigate any concern about that. We only invest in private American companies. Our peers can't say that. So the notion that, and by the way, those are minority positions in growth equity. So we don't have any strategic control over the companies. We're simply economic investors. So had we been more like private equity, we're getting involved in management or trying to do that, or activism, then that criticism might have some merit. But the way that we're investing does not lend itself to any of the things that you're
But why would that prevent, placing a call, telling the Pentagon, we need a contract for this company?
Right, but nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, but you would do that if you were a strategic investor that was going on the board and having some role with management, because that would be part of your role. What I'm saying is we're growth equity investors, which are passive in nature, taking minority positions and trying to get an economic return. That's very different. And you can contrast that to plenty of other, talking about crony capitalism, then you should look at many other examples, even in Democratic administrations. I can name many for you, I won't do that right now, where there are very close relationships between the heads of those global firms, which are investing abroad against the interests of the United States, taking money from China, which we would never do, and then going and having a phone call with the sitting president, and having that president maybe go to your summer home and sleep in your bed.
And you were a former Democrat.
I am, but
Yeah.
I thought that was, uncouth back then as well. So,
I think I've also been through this ringer. I mean, they tried throwing me in jail for treason, a crime punishable by death, for years. We're not playing these games. We don't have to. We're making common sense investments that other people weren't willing to make because they didn't check off whatever DEI check boxes they needed to do. We did the things that weren't popular. We've stood by those. We've been very clear about what we're doing, what our mission is, and we've been very consistent
and
in that messaging.
we've been vindicated, to your point. That's what it was, is we were about 4 years early with this. So unlike Al Gore, who was vice president of the country for 8 years, years and then decided to become an investor after talking about climate change for those 8 years, and then became a climate change investor. How convenient. You know, we were pushing back against ESG that had really taken control of so much of our system. We are providing the majority of Americans choice. And by the way, we were early also to defense tech, which is one of the areas that we're investing, as you pointed out, more than others. But again, we were doing it before any of these other guys jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah,
that's the most important point.
You started this in 2023.
That's right. Actually, we started doing these deals in 2021 on more one-offs. We institutionalized the offering by 2023, but we had done SPACs together prior to that and other ways to try to push back against what we saw were deplatforming and censorship. So a lot of this was a reaction and out of necessity, which is what Don likes to say. And we're really happy that we were able to do that on behalf of, I think, the majority of Americans.
Yeah, again, we got into crypto for the same reason. We created Truth Social because we were deplatformed and we were censored. We got into crypto because we were debanked and canceled. We came up with solutions. We had a great soapbox to be able to talk about this. You had a lot of Americans all over the country that were worried that, hey, they were going to get debanked. They weren't going to be able to have credit card processing done at their small business because perhaps it was a Second Amendment and that wasn't popular, even though it's the Second Amendment, a basic tenet of American freedom. We saw these problems. We were able to address them. We had the soapbox to do it. We had the sophistication to do it, and we had the balance sheet to be able to do this. And it turns out when you actually start talking about these things, when you actually start fighting for them, other people are like, you know what, that's a great idea. You have to open the door for them to come through. It's not easy. It's rough. We went through a lot. You know, as a family business, with all the things that we had to
this
deal
is
with
all
over the
reaction.
years.
Yeah.
You know, it's a reaction to a cancer that was taking over America, and you know, I think the response to it has been positive. People understand what we were doing.
So you mentioned SPACs. You've been in SPACs for a while. You just a few weeks ago, I think, launched a new SPAC that you're going to do. So what's the target here? What's the goal?
Well, that's our third SPAC. We've already done two successful ones that successfully merged with companies. One that was trying to insulate people and ensure kind of transactional freedom. One of the things we saw where if you were trying to buy products in certain areas, you wouldn't be able to do that on Stripe or other places. So we took a company public to handle that. Just a few months ago, we took the second one public, which was called Grab a Gun, which was tried to insulate and enhance the Second Amendment.
Hasn't done that well as a public company.
Well, we're the sponsor. Our goal is to get them, and it was probably one of the most successful SPAC transactions of all time.
Well, right, but that speaks to the whole sort of misalignment of incentives, with SPAC sponsors and investors that buy the company.
We haven't sold any shares or made any money on the deal, so we're locked up. So that is a misnomer when it comes to the way we structured our deal. So we have not done anything. In fact, we returned over 70% to our IPO investors. So from a perspective of a SPAC sponsor, we've exceeded anyone's expectations.
But why do you think the stock hasn't? I mean, where is it?
I'm not part of the company, right? So what I can do is the following: enhance the name recognition of the company, take it public on the New York Stock Exchange, and provide it with $170 million in cash. We did all three of those things, which is why whenever we do another SPAC, we're oversubscribed. So, and also I would say it's all relative. We did that when the SPAC product on the last two has been highly challenged, and yet we were still able to perform this way. So we had 0 redemptions with the Grab and Win one we just did. The usual rate is over 90%. So it was a phenomenal transaction. And the company's been public for 3 or 4 months. Let's see what they can do with what we provided them. So from their perspective and from the investors' perspective who bought our SPAC IPO, we have outperformed. And that's why you'll see, and I'm very confident that with the third one, we'll also be oversubscribed. So again, you don't have to take my word for it. The investors are speaking, right? It's a free market, and they continue to support our SPAC sponsor team. Now, you asked what we're going to do. We don't have a target in mind because we just filed, and we're going to go out and look, but it's going to be consistent with this, which is the reindustrialization of America. And we're going to try to continue to do those things that are going to help the prosperity and security of the United States.
What's been I imagine he's had the company for a while. You joined as a partner, I think, officially last year, about a year ago. So what's been response? I mean, it feels like you're up to $1 billion in assets now.
Listen, I think the response has been great. People have been looking for this for a long time. They also understand that we've been in this for a long time. We've been doing it right. I think a lot of people are concerned about sort of the political winds. People adapt something. I can make a couple bucks today, but the political winds change. Something happens. It's going to be different, and all of a sudden they bail out. We've been very consistent in our messaging. We were doing this when it wasn't popular. We were doing it when it was borderline dangerous. And they understand that we're in there for the long haul and we believe in these principles. So I think that consistency in messaging is fundamental, and people get it. And it's great seeing other people trying to do the same thing now. Yeah. We were just the guys doing it when it wasn't popular.
Imitation, highest form of flattery.
Sorry, Sarah Eisen wrapping up a couple of days from FII in Riyadh. Just a reminder, Leslie, of how much money is moving around that part of the world.